Hi, I'm Lance Lambert. Thanks for tuning into the Vintage Vehicle Show. We are in Graham, Washington at Bob Davidson's home. He has graciously opened his doors for us to come in and talk to him. And what we're going to talk about is the West Coast car scene, Northwest car scene, the pinstriping world, all kinds of stuff. Bob, do you mind me calling you a legend? And welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's nice to have that kind of a title.
Yeah.
I'm just another hot rodder.
Well,
this is my whole life.
You are definitely one that's held in high respect by everybody.
Really?
You betcha.
That's exciting.
So when I was a young sprout coming up in Tacoma and was looking at the old guys, you know, the guys that were like 5 years older than me, they were the guys we really looked up to for designing cars and had the coolest cars in town and all that. You were one of the players back then. And here you are still doing the same thing. Tell us about how this all started for you.
Well, you know, when I was a kid, I worked at Top Auto Stores as a part-time job. I was in high school, and I'd go down there every night after school was out, and I'd work until 9 o'clock. So when the hot rods and new cars would pull in, to me, it was all being introduced to the scene right then and there, and all I was doing down there at that time was painting the advertisements they put up in the windows for Friday night, you know, selling a squeegee or something on sale, you know, to draw attention. And a couple people would pull up with these cars that were different than the daily driver we owned and had at that time. And I was excited about that. I was only about 14, 15 years old. So
what was your first car?
My first car is when I got in the service and I got stationed in the Air Force back east, and I got a 36 three-window coupe Ford, and I worked on that all the time I was back there until I got orders to go to French Morocco, Africa. And then I sold the car because I knew I couldn't drive it all the way back here before I left. And after selling the car, they canceled my orders. So I went back to try to buy it back. So I had to borrow $100 to see if the guy would take $100 more than what I sold it for then, which was $800. But that was a lot of money back then.
That was huge money back then.
I know it. And even $100, if a guy could have made that kind of profit, but he didn't want to sell it.
Any idea where that car is now?
I have no idea. That's been many, many, many years ago.
Then you came back to Tacoma and started being a major player in the car scene, right?
Well, yeah, I did. Matter of fact, we rolled into town. Everything we owned was in the back seat of our car. You know, we had nowhere to live. I was married, and so I had to get busy and find a job. So I was knocking on doors, and unfortunately, I was able to knock on a door at the Shell refinery, and the guy said, "How would you like to work nights at a gas station?" So I said, "That'd be great." So I went up there and started pumping gas. Unannounced to me, in 2 weeks, I was the manager of the station, and which made it a little more easier and a little more nicer, you know. And then I started, the guys would come and hang out there, and I'd do car names. Remember when the car names were a big deal?
You bet, yeah.
And I was putting bad whiskey and miscarriage and different names on these cars, you know. And pretty soon I found myself lettering these cars and making more money lettering the cars than I was pumping gas.
Do you remember the very first car that you painted? Or?
Yeah, I did a car for, I believe, for Chaz Martin when he was in high school called...
Another big name in the Northwest.
Yeah, exactly. And I did a car for him where he called it Mother Pearl on the side of the car. He had a Pearl 53 Oldsmobile.
When you came back from the Air Force, what year was that?
1959. I rolled into town here in September.
Describe the scene in the Northwest, the auto scene, the hot rod scene back then.
Well, the hot rod scene, there was a lot of car clubs that had started out, and people were getting a gathering of the people that ran around with each other, and they were calling themselves a Pacific Car Club, so they were naming those car clubs. And there wasn't a lot of activity in car shows or any of that then, and everybody was working on their own cars. So the thing that we have today on the rat rod scene is kind of how we were then. We didn't have a lot of money, but we were doing what we could with what we had. Yeah. And people were hanging out at drive-ins, and they were hanging out and showing what new modification they did to their car, and they did most of it themselves because they had no money back in those days, you know, to do it. And we hung out at the gas stations, you know. It was kind of like a hangout. The service station was, and the local drive-in was a hangout for us to go and show off our car.
Right, the car club scene back then. At about that time, there were the Toppers. You started the Capers, Demanos, rickshaws,
the
Steeds.
Yes.
What are some of the other clubs?
Road Sharks were around at that time. There was a few others. It's hard for me to think back at that. So we seen this possibility. So we thought, well, let's get a hot rod council going. So we started the Northwest Hot Rod Council, and that took off like gangbusters.
Yeah.
and became very successful for a while there.
I was a member way back when.
Were you?
Yeah, you bet.
And that was a long, long time ago, you know, that, and so it's hard for my memories to click into this as active as I've been in this whole business, you know, to flash back to
I
that.
remember back then the council sent me out to a Gear Lords meeting. They were a club in Auburn, Washington, to decide whether or not they were worthy of being a member. And so this 16-year-old kid goes out there being me, and I'm just kind of, I don't know, they're fine. And they became a member of the council.
Yes, that's right, too. I remember the Gear Lords, too, yeah.
So the car show scene in the Northwest, you know, everybody, the ethnocentrism, everybody thinks the world revolves around their community or their whatever. But it seems to me, Southern California, everybody thinks of as the huge car scene where it was all happening, and probably very true. But I think up here in the Northwest, you know, including the Portland area on up, we were really active in this area. It was a real hot rod mecca around here. What do you think?
It really was, you know, and even though California got all the promotion, all the advertising for it, because the magazines were all down there then. We had none of that up here. We never had our chances to be written up in a book or have photographs taken back in those days. But they sure seen the possibilities of that by putting on the car shows they did back in the days of the Kingdom was around and Tacoma Armory and stuff like that. We had some outstanding car shows that drew a lot of attention from other areas to come and compete there, and some of the national organizations that put on the shows and the National Street Rod Association and stuff like that. This area got huge with members. It was just amazing, you know, of the interest it drew. We had a lot of talent up here in the auto body business too. A lot of guys are doing a lot of custom work in their backyard, but there were talented people that worked at body shops during the day, repairing cars and stuff. But as a sideline in the evening, they would be nosing and decking a car or chopping or channeling or whatever it was at that time.
Yeah. So you started striping a long time ago, and it just, you and Junior Nelson and a few other people here in the Northwest are you know, you are the people that do the striping
The
here.
one, yeah, they're well known, yes. And years ago when I first met Junior, you know, he had the Green Onion, which was a Model A, and we striped it at my garage that night. I striped it, and Junior kind of watched me, and then later on, boy, he went away with that because he was a firefighter, and he had some downtime on his hands to create the pinstriping industry, and he's done excellent. He's a quality exhibitor out there for us today. You know, it's just amazing. But it just amazes you the talent you can bring it out of people. Unbelievable, the youngsters today and what they're going to be doing for us to keep this thing alive.
Yeah, you have some really cool cars. Tell us about, well, just tell us about some of your cars.
Well, I had a lot of cars over the years, you know, and I would show them in car shows and different things. Only had one at a time then. You know, I've gotten along in life now that I have 5.
And you have is it a 50 Ford?
A 50 Ford, yeah, they call it the Living Legend. I've had that car
Tell us
for
about that.
many, many years, and I got that car from a gal that lived in San Francisco, and she had given it to her daughter who moved up here and then put it up for sale. And we went down to look at a 50 Mercury, which I thought I was going to go look at, and when I got there it was a 50 Ford. So I ended up taking it anyway and then started working on it and had different people doing work on it over the years, you know. And
I think that car is a good example of if you do things right, 20 years later, the car is still going to look right. And that car looks so traditional,
so
custom.
period perfect,
Yeah.
I think is the wording of it, because I've seen the way George Barris and Sam Barrison were building the hot rods and the custom cars, the lead suds they called them back in those days, you know, the Frenching and nosing and decking and dropping it down on the ground with the white walls and the trick rich man's hubcaps on it and things of that nature. And I just kept it that way, and that trend grew and grew and grew. There's a lot of nostalgia awards it won and different things like that, and it's just amazing that has gotten more successful today because people want to flash back to that era.
And then your 55 Ford, it's a pretty nice looking
Yeah,
car.
it's 56.
56,
yeah,
excuse me.
56 Ford. I did the same basic stuff there with that car too, the nosing and decking, you know, and making it comfortable in the way it looked and the way it was back in those days. And all you had to do is change a bolt pattern on the taillight lens and put a 59 Buick in the 56 Ford, you know. It fits right in the bezel perfectly, you know. The white wall tire routine, and then you had the chrome rims coming out, the reverse chrome rims. They had all kinds of center caps. And I got one of the traditional center caps on that chrome wheel now, and it draws a lot of attention. They don't even make that cap anymore, and everybody wants to know where I got it.
Yeah.
Well, I had the car for a while, so.
Then you dabbled in, more than dabble, you became a GM fan. You have, is that a 50 Buick?
I have a 50 Buick Sedanette, that's the fastback. And I was at a rod run one time, and some old guy come up and told me when he seen this, he says, you know, this is the most saleable car to doctors in 1950 than any other vehicle. And I said, really? You know, I was surprised he had that, came out with that. He says, yeah, I read that somewhere, and also I'm one of the doctors that bought one. And he was an elderly gentleman at that time, you know, but it was just comical how the people will tell you the history behind your cars. That's how you learn a lot.
Then a couple of Cadillacs.
I have two Cadillacs. I have a 64 and a 61 bubble top. And both cars are built like you would have in the 60s with the custom look of the white wall tires. And I have on the 64, I have wire wheels and the old traditional tuck and roll interior in them, and on a wild trick paint job. Did some highlight modifications and lowered the car and put it down. And it's a big lead sled. It's just amazing how many people like that Cadillac, that 64. And then we got the traditional one, of course, is the bubble top Cadillac. It's got bucket seats, and I had to, of course, nose and deck it and take the door handles off and lower it, you know, and do a trick interior and a trick paint. And we did the ghost flames on it, and it really snaps a few heads. We took it to Yakima this year, and it was just amazing the crowds that were around that car all the weekend we were there.
You mentioned earlier off camera that you were doing lots of pinstriping, and then it looked like pinstriping was fading away, you thought, but then it just kept getting bigger and bigger. What do you see as far as how the past has transitioned into the, what's your crystal ball say about artwork in the future? Is there still going to be a lot of pinstriping, or you know, Mike LaValle came up with a whole different kind of flames? There's somebody else going to come up with a whole different kind of flames, and somebody, you know, what do you see out there artistically?
Well, I look at some of the talent we have today and the paints that are out there on the market. They can do wonders with them. And some of these guys are so talented in doing the airbrush work now with those paints. You have a window time with your base coat, clear coat process, and you got your house of colors, and these companies coming up with these pearls. They're just phenomenal. It's just going to be an unbelievable piece of canvas when you get a car to do it. And if you can get that car different and set a new trend with it, which you try to do, and people try to hide the ghost flame effect or the mural effect inside the base coat, clear coat process, they've started on a two-tone effect. It's going to be a new tradition rolling out there. And then they trim it and outline it all in striping, and that adds a little buzz to what I do, you know. And now you're seeing more people stripe the engine compartments now and stripe the door jambs. It's just amazing. The outside of the car may not be striped, but it has a custom paint job. But you open the hood and you go, wow, you know, here everything, the air cleaners, instead of having them all chrome and shiny in there, they're painting them in there and making them look real wild. I'm looking to see down the road, now this is a tradition, people are going to start wood graining. Valve covers, air cleaners.
So.
You watch this trend come up, and it's going to be big when it does. The hidden areas, you just open the door and you show it. You know, right now I'm striping inside of gas flaps and inside glove box doors, where they have the two cups where you can sit your drink in. When in the old days, spiderwebbing those and stuff like that. People want something different than anybody else, yet it's personalizing their product.
Bob, you have a lot to see, but it's a good example of what seems to be just really growing in the hobby, in the garage, the man cave, whatever you want.
Yes.
And they're just, you know, what used to be a single car garage with junk piled everywhere and filthy is now painted white with overstuffed chairs and checkered floors, and people are, the art of the automobile is continuing on into the building, the four walls around it.
Yeah, exactly, and you're seeing that in a lot of decor that the people do with their homes and stuff is tied around what they do for their hobby. It's just amazing. The woman takes care of the house and the interior portion of that, and the guy takes care of his man cave, his garage, where he keeps his part of his life in there, and some of the people have now starting to take care of that and keep it first class.
What award have you won that's meant more to you than anything else? Anything pop into your mind?
Well, yeah, I've won a lot of best of shows, and one of the awards I just got, of course, I was just overwhelmed with it, that I'm in the finalists of the Custom of the Year in the Good Guys organization. Which I don't know too much about what that's all about yet, but I did receive that this year at Good Guys. And of course I was at the Bulletproof down there in Centralia, and I was there demonstrating pinstriping. I took my 54 down there to display it while I was there. Ended up winning Best of Show. It just blew me away that that car was selected. And when they talked about it, they said it's period perfect. It's right of the theme and the direction that they're going with that format. And it's just amazing. And there's a lot of them that stand out. I, of course, in the Hall of Fame and things like that. And I got Street Rod of the Year a couple, 3 times. I don't want to be bragging about all this stuff, but it's on the walls. They can come and see it, you know. And
you have awards here. You have a lot of model cars here. Over here, you have you're really into, looks like NASCAR and all that.
yeah,
kind
I did a lot
stuff.
of lettering of the NASCARs and creating stuff. That's how I happened to get into that. And then I was tied up with a gentleman, and we had a stock car. We raced around the country, you know, and it was another form of the car game that I'm playing, you know. And then I ended up lettering everyone's cars. And at one time at Spanaway, I had 32 cars in the main event of 40 cars that I had lettered. You know, and that was kind of a little bit of my history, you know.
Nice. You got a car club plaque
Steve
there.
plaques, yeah, one of the
got a
local
few of
clubs
those
that were
around.
here back in the early years, you know, and then there was quite a few different type of plaques I had to design for a couple of the people, do the actual drawing, and they took it from there. There were some modifications, changes on them, but I sketched them out and gave them a direction. I didn't do that with the Steeds, but other clubs I had done that, you know, the Capers and the Graffiti Vintage Club and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so.
I think Sandy Gillespie was the guy that designed the Steeds plaque.
Dash plaques.
Oh yeah, you did a lot of those, I bet.
Well, I didn't design a lot of them, but dash plaques is what you get to go into these events, and you don't realize how many of these events in your career you've gone to, and you just collected them and threw them in a box, you know, as you came back from the event. Well, finally I put them all up. I said, I'm going to display them and put them up.
I see you've got them along the wall back there, up above the doors, and
Yes,
in other
over the
places
headers,
in the building.
and up on the other side of the building. It's just amazing. You don't realize how many there are and how many times you've been doing what you've been doing, or how old you are. That gets a little scary.
Yeah. Well, with the garage scene, I'm a columnist for Garage Style magazine, and I see lots of, you know, amazing garages, and it's such a part of the hobby. What's the one piece of advice you'd give somebody that's designing a garage?
Well, in not even in the designing of it, but if you're going to finish it off like it's inside your home, you spend a lot of hours in that garage, and you want to feel comfortable about what you're doing. And me and striping, and you'll see that in my studio, I've got to feel comfortable around my surroundings as I'm working. It gets you more motivated and creative with what you're trying to do. And in the garage itself, if your garage is clean and spotless, that means your cars are well cared for and they're not a piece of junk, you know. And they're sitting in the garage on I put placemats under the wheels so it doesn't stain the checkerboard floor and things like this, and people are just overwhelmed at the care they get. And the days of the car covers, I think, are out now. If you get a garage, you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, you don't want to hide your pride and
Exactly.
joy. I was doing an appraisal for somebody in my garage, and they brought their 5-year-old grandson with them. And the little boy walks in, he looks around my garage and goes, "You've got a lot of toys."
Yeah, I've heard that statement a lot.
yeah.
It's just unbelievable. Yeah, they're just overwhelmed. They're excited about that. But you're leaving an impression on that kid. It surprises you, but you do leave an impression on him.
So we've got your 50 Buick here that you've been doing some stripes on, pinstriping on. Show us your method here, your technique. And I'm always curious, or find it interesting, how stripers hold their hands and how they brace their hands when they're doing it.
Just for support, we're using a dagger brush here, Mac triple aught brush be able to draw the fine line and hold enough paint.
And that's the secret, isn't it? Is
Yes.
the brush and the paint. And it's,
Yes.
I always hear about one shot. Is that one
That's
shot?
one shot,
And
yes.
what is it about one shot that makes it special?
It's a sign painter's paint, and when it covers, you usually don't have to duplicate over the top of it. See, when you pull a line down to join the other lines, the color flows and covers in one coat. And the only time you make a repeat is if you're straightening up an error on what you're trying to do, you know. And as we do this stuff, you know, sometimes you have a palette, you could use the side of your cup, or sometimes I also use my fingers to form the feel of the paint itself as it flows.
I've seen guys use a stick, brace their hand with a stick.
I've seen that with sign painters a lot because they don't want to get their arm and their hand in the work because it's all wet as you're working with it. and you're drawing your lines and stuff. And if you make an error, you always draw the left side first. And if you make an error, you can duplicate your error or problem, whether it was planned or not, on the right side.
Well, why wouldn't it work the opposite and make a mistake on the right side and duplicate it
It's
on the
hard to
left?
view it.
Ah.
As you're trying to view it, as you're trying to do your striping and pull your lines down, as you're trying to actually get right to where they both look alike, your hand is covering the work on the opposite side, so you can't see what you're actually doing. If it's done first to the left, you can visually see what you're doing. For if you attempted to do the right side first, then to go do the left, you notice my hand covers the artwork. So I can't see, I can only remember.
Okay.
And as we get older, that gets a little slower.
Is it just the opposite if you're left-handed?
I'm sure it is, yes. It's up to the artist at that, and there are some left-handed pinstripers out there, some awesome, talented people. It's just amazing that they can attempt to do this left-handed.
Can you spot a left-hand job?
I can't by looking at it, no.
Okay.
But what I can do is I also try to do a situation where I'm having to do a design or something where I have to reverse my hand the opposite direction to keep my fingers out of the work and stuff like that. It just blows you away sometimes of how the people created the lines that they created at the time and what their thought was of what they were trying to attempt to get done that looked good and filled in with what the theme was. And if you lived in the 50s and watched the 50s being done, which I did in magazine form that Von Dutch and Dean Jeffries was doing, I seen the styling, and I still carry that little theme. It's in your artistic part of your brain. It carries that on today. So that tradition is still basically there. And you get more flair and more flips to your colors now, where they didn't a lot in those days. And they were very crude in those days too. If you look at some of the artwork that Von Dutch and Dean Jeffries had done, and that Big Daddy Ed Roth, it was very crude striping. I mean, you can see fat lines with skinny lines and back and forth. Today, the talent of the people that are doing it are perfectionists. It's just unbelievable. And I like to think I'm one of those guys, but I watch and look at other people's work, and they're just phenomenal of the professionalism they have.
Is the brain in the hand or in the head? Do you know where you're going next, or the hand just sort of goes? Is it a dance? Is it a ballet?
It's a ballet. You look at what you're doing and how it's flowing, and is that going to be in style or is it not? And it just flows with you, and you get creative as you can look at some of the panels that I have over there and look at the artistic volume of work and multiple colors that you tie into that. Doesn't mean you're going to do that on the car. It's stuff that we do to show off our work and our talent of what we can do. And then they once see that, then you're the guy that's going to do my car. Not knowing that you're going to do that wild color thing on his car, but that is to show the different styles of lines and different styles of designs by looking at the different colors. This is a one color thing here, but now people are requesting 2 and 3 colors in their design of the car they want striped. But this format here, usually when you're striping a car and you're trying to bring back the 50s, you have something on the nose and something on the deck lid, and you usually go over the headlights and the tail lights and maybe around the door handles or around the antenna. Remember how the 50s were?
Yeah.
And that's the styling you kind of pull into the way it was back in those days, and they used the one color.
Okay. Any possibility of me putting a lion on this?
Absolutely. We're going to see that if you are talented or can do that. And
Well, I can answer that right now.
And
I think
hope
that'll be a
paint.
no.
I want to see you bring that sucker down and put it right in there. What do you think?
Okay, well, I'll try here.
And then you can hold that if you'd like, and you feel
For
comfortable with
security.
that.
So, which angle, is it this way or is it this way?
It's this way. It's like a dagger brush, see?
Okay.
This is where I'm using this as a palette. See, it's like the
That's
knife.
the way,
See? Yeah,
okay.
that's the way you want to kind of pull that line down.
So I should get over here,
And if you
and
notice here, I made a smudge on that tip, so you don't have to be exactly by the way I made
so
that
I need to
smudge.
just draw this down right in there
Right.
like that. Okay.
Exactly, and put a little pressure. Put a little pressure to your line, and you could use your other hand to hold your thumb if that helps you too. Right here, I usually put a little pressure to hold your thumb as you pull that line down.
All right. This is it. This may be the beginning of a new career.
Now put a little pressure. Don't be afraid to put the pressure. Pressure will do the direction or the thickness of your line, and curve it in as you go.
Okay.
It's not too shabby. You could possibly do this. You got a little bit of a wider swib there. Now put a little, see if you can go back over your line and put a little more pressure to give a thickness of what you've done up to this point as far as the thicknesses of the line. Put a little pressure, you can tell. It doesn't hurt to do a little pressure as you pull. And the phrase I use is pull. You're pulling a line is what you're doing. Very good. Very good.
All
and you
right.
can see right here I have to dress up this corner. So and in this business you don't ever forget that you have a rag and you can't erase.
Okay.
It doesn't hurt a thing.
You did your side wrong. Mine's the better.
I kind of see that, and I kind of like yours a little more. It's a little fatter, so
Yeah.
I think you're thinking maybe this hood's too
Yeah,
wide.
yeah. I'm glad I could help you out, Bob.
You know, having the great Lance Lamberg stripe my car, I might leave this on here.
Yeah, that's the value of this car is.
It's gone up already.
Oh yeah, you bet.
I know. See how you adjusted to that? That's beautiful.
See how I made a big mess
but-
right there?
Yeah, we all make these messes, but we can correct them. But the point is, you thicken that lineup like it was required to be.
Yeah.
You know, which
Yeah.
is great.
Okay. All right, and I should probably like pinstriping by Lance.
Well, I wouldn't get
Lambert.
that far carried away right now, but there is that possibility that could happen down the road.
All right, I put a little thing here with a little arrow pointing at it, saying this part done by Lance
Yeah,
Lambert.
this is my part.
Yeah.
I know. I know, it takes a while, you know, and back in the older days, I used to practice on toilet seats, you know.
Yeah.
And you could erase it, flush it all down the toilet when you're
Yeah,
done and stuff
yeah.
like that.
Well, Bob, what an opportunity to be here today and see your collection and learn a little bit about pinstriping, let the viewers know more about you and your background. So I just want to, a very heartfelt, sincere thank you for being on the Vintage Vehicle Show.
I appreciate that. It's a great
Okay.
honor to,
Okay.
to have your company and everything.
Okay.
Believe me.
All right. And thank you for tuning into the Vintage Vehicle Show. We've had a great time here putting on a little striping and cars and garage show for you. So glad you watched the show and tune in again next time. Until then, bye-bye.